All right, well, the water situation in Hammanskraal is a crisis, and certainly it probably is not fit for cooking. We looked at that earlier. And with the rolling blackouts now so prevalent across South Africa, consumers may have some doubts about the food in their fridges. Earlier, residents of Buccleuch threw rotten meat at the gates of Eskom's head office in Megawatt Park. Well, to discuss, we're joined by Professor Lucia Anelich, who is a food safety expert and microbiologist. Professor, thank you for being with us. I don't know if you can comment on Hammanskraal particularly. I don't know if you heard our earlier interview, but people are dying. It's unclear how come, but we know that the tap water is unsafe. It's not clear if tanker water is unsafe. But you have a situation where you have to cook food. So it becomes very difficult. How do you ensure, firstly, when you're cooking, that you are safe and your family is safe?
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Francis. Yes, I have heard a portion about that, but I've also read about the disastrous situation in Hammanskraal. It is most likely a water safety issue rather than a food safety issue that is probably causing those illnesses and unfortunately the deaths. But it's important to also use safe water when preparing food, because if we are washing fresh vegetables, for example, or fresh fruit, and you're eating that fruit or vegetable without actually cooking it, then the water has to be of a good quality. Otherwise, you are just transferring the harmful bacteria from the contaminated water directly to the food that you're going to eat. All
right. So, I mean, where do we start? So let's start with the food in your fridge as well. After a bout of load shedding, how do you ascertain whether it's safe or not?
Well, the most important thing is to have, or to ensure rather, that your fridge is running at 4 degrees Celsius. Now, most of our fridges, unfortunately, don't run at 4. They usually run at a little higher than that. So for every increase in degree in your fridge temperature, the bacteria in food are going to start multiplying a lot faster. So ensuring or trying to ascertain whether your food is actually safe for human consumption, you must never, ever taste that food, because there are two things we need to distinguish here. Food spoilage is one thing. Normally you can see it. If you had to taste it, which I don't advise, you would taste that it's off, but you can certainly smell it's off. You can see that it's off. Very often there might be slime, or the color of the product changed. There might be blowing in a pack, for example. Those are all signs of spoilage. And that means the food needs to be basically going into a waste bin. But tasting it for safety is the worst thing that one can do, because when a food is unsafe, you actually can't taste it or see that it's unsafe or smell that it's unsafe. It usually looks and tastes perfectly fine, but in fact there might be contaminating bacteria that will make you sick, or toxins that those bacteria can form sometimes that will also make you sick.
All right, so it's difficult because we're seeing long bouts of load shedding. Food prices are up, people are struggling. So are you saying the only way you can be sure that the food in your fridge remains safe is if you check the temperature? And even during load shedding, obviously it helps if you don't open and close the fridge, but it has to remain at 4 degrees or below.
Absolutely, and it will last, your food in your fridge will last for about 4 hours if the fridge door is kept closed, as you mentioned. But the constant bouts that we get during the day, a 4-hour and then maybe 2 hours and then another 4-hour bout, all of that accumulates over a 24-hour period, which means that any shelf life of the product, so if you read the use by label, for example, and it gives you a specific date, that date will likely be a lot sooner than that date that you can actually see on the pack, because the food has been compromised because of these constant bouts of load shedding that we get.
What practical advice do you have? You said a lot of fridges run higher. I mean, can you turn down the fridge? Are modern fridges responsive if they say a certain degree in terms of temperature? Can you believe that? And should you be buying food more frequently? What can people do?
Well, there are a few things one can do. You can actually have frozen ice packs and add them into your refrigerator. That will also help to keep the temperature down. If you have access to dry ice, that's also very, very useful. The only thing with dry ice, of course, it has a human damage potential. So one must just be very, very careful how you handle it. Also buying food in smaller amounts so that you don't leave raw meat or raw poultry, for example, for a long period of time in your refrigerator. Buy smaller amounts, cook them, eat them, and try not to have any leftovers. If you have got a lot of perishable food in your refrigerator, then try your best to freeze it so that it has a longer time during which it will then remain frozen and bacteria do not grow when a product is frozen at low temperatures.
Final question. I mean, before you even buy the food, you have to trust that the retailers are sticking to their cold chains, as they call it, despite what's happening in this country. Do you feel that we can trust the retailers?
I think one can trust the majority of the larger retailers because they've got infrastructure in place to ensure that the cold chain is not broken. It is, of course, very costly as well for them to ensure that they've got generators that are running, the petrol, the diesel, whatever it is that the generator runs on. It's all leading to extremely high costs. But the majority do have this infrastructure in place.
All right, thank you for some tips. It is alarming. You say it can look fine, your food can look great, but it can still be harmful. That was food safety expert and microbiologist Professor Lucia Anelich.